Hello and welcome to Real Cheating Story. If you don't give me everything I want in the divorce, I'll dedicate the rest of my life to destroying you, even if I wreck myself in the process. That is what I told my wife. Well, did she listen? No, she did not. So, I did what I promised. Let me tell you how I did it. Over the 7 years that I've operated my family's landscaping business, there have been several computer failures. I've learned to minimize them, of course. I have both local and cloud backups for my critical data, and I've built redundancy into my infrastructure to ensure that, in the event of a failure, operations won't be disrupted too much. Oh, wait, I got so deep into the tech stuff that I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Donald Summers, Don to my friends and Donnie to my wife and mother, and only to them. I'm 35 years old, 6 feet 5 inches tall, and I weigh 227 pounds. I'm proud to say that not much of that is fat. A lifetime of working outdoors has left me with what my wife calls a weathered look. I also have a deep, semi-permanent tan. For the last 13 years, I've been married to the love of my life, Brittany Summers, formerly Carson. Brittany is a personal trainer at a local gym. She's also 35, and unlike me, she's fair-skinned with blonde hair and blue eyes. She has a faint dusting of freckles across the bridge of her nose. Britt is 5 foot tall, petite, and athletic, as you'd expect from a trainer. With her pale complexion, freckles, and her adorable smile, Brittany looks a lot like a little pixie. We have 2 kids together, our 9-year-old daughter, Danielle, and our 7-year-old son, Brian. Our business, Summers Landscaping, was started by my father when I was a child. I worked with him, helping out in the office. My mother had a difficult pregnancy with me, so they decided not to have any more children. As a result, I became very close to both of them, spending as much time with them as I could. There was never any doubt in my mind that, one day, when Dad was ready to step down, I'd take over. When I was older, Dad insisted that I work in the field with the crews. He said it would give me a much better understanding of how the business worked than just staying in the office. To my surprise, I loved it. I wasn't afraid of manual labor, and I took to it naturally. By the time I was a senior in high school, I was leading work crews during the summer. When I finally took over the business 7 years ago, I expanded our client base and the services we offer. We now have 12 different work crews and offer a wide range of landscaping, ornamental gardening, and snow removal services. With more crews, I'm not really needed in the field much except during peak times, but I still head out because I enjoy it. Plus, it's good for the crews to know the boss is out there, checking up on them. More and more, though, I find myself in the small office attached to the company warehouse, buried under the mountain of paperwork that comes with running a growing business. The end of March and early April are the times I spend the most in the office, doing taxes, reviewing personnel records, contracts, and other business-related matters. For about 2 weeks, I don't leave the office at all during business hours, it's just part of the routine. This particular year, my mom had been with me in the office. She said she was bored and wanted something to do. She used to help Dad with the books when he ran the business, but Dad hadn't used computers, and Mom wasn't the most tech-savvy person. She accidentally erased several critical files. Fortunately, I'm meticulous about backups, but restoring that much data takes time. Since I had a few free minutes while the files were being restored, I decided to bring up Google Earth. I'd been using the tool a lot lately. It helps to have a bird's-eye view of the land before starting on a project. That way, I don't have to spend money on expensive aerial photography until the final presentation. I spent a few minutes on the project I was working on, but finally decided that I'd done everything I could without the client's input. My backups still weren't finished loading, so I decided to look at my own house. I'd wanted to put in a swimming pool for a long time, and now that the kids were getting older, it seemed like the right time to get serious about the idea. That's when everything started to go wrong. As I clicked and zoomed in on my house, I noticed something odd. There was a car I didn't recognize parked in our driveway. I try to stay involved with my family as much as I can, and I know just about all of Britt's friends. Still, I didn't think too much of it at first. The photo looked to have been taken sometime during the past winter. There was a light, patchy blanket of snow on the house and lawn. Looking at the garage, I saw the addition I'd made was completed, so the photo couldn't be more than 4 months old. Expanding the garage had been my winter project. The car I didn't recognize was red, but that was all I could tell. I don't know much about cars, so I couldn't identify the make or model. I glanced at the progress bar for the file transfer and saw that it had barely moved. Oh well, I thought to myself, at least I have something to pass the time while I wait. I clicked back over to the satellite image of my house and stared at it for a few more minutes. The sun angle didn't give me any clues about the time of day. Oomph, I muttered, not fully aware I'd made a sound. I clicked on the Street View tab next. I knew it probably wouldn't help. It was unlikely that the Street View image would have been taken at the same time as the overhead image. Still, I had the time, and I was curious. So, I made that fateful little click. The Street View had been taken later. It was sunny, and the dogwood tree I had planted in the front yard was just starting to flower. The car that had piqued my interest wasn't visible, but my wife Brittany was. She was quite visible indeed, standing at the front door of our house, her arms wrapped around a man who wasn't me, kissing him deeply. One of her hands was clearly visible, clutching the man in a way that made my temper flare instantly. My wife, was kissing and touching another man. I forced myself to calm down before doing anything else. I printed a few copies of the image. I needed a hard copy. Next, I looked more closely at the man in the photo. The camera angle didn't give me a great look at his face, but he seemed vaguely familiar. With an almost physical effort, I pushed my anger down. There would be a time for that, but first, I had to find out exactly what was happening. What I saw in the photo was definitely inappropriate, and no matter what, we'd be having a serious talk about it. As much as it hurt and enraged me, I had to know what else was going on. But how? I'd read the same stories you probably have, where the husband sets up cameras or plants recording devices, or even hires a private investigator. Those were all options. I'm tech savvy enough to install cameras. It's not exactly rocket science. Planting recorders is just as easy, and hiring a private investigator is simple enough too, though expensive. For that matter, I run my own business and don't have set office hours. If I wanted to follow her around or stop by the house unexpectedly, I could do that with minimal impact on my work. But before I could think about an endgame, I needed to know what was really going on. I growled low in my throat as I looked at the photo again. Try as I might, I couldn't quite force my anger back into its cage. Then, I had a thought. It was a long shot, but it might be a starting point. The man in the photo looked vaguely like one of Brittany's old boyfriends from college. We'd met in our junior year at State. It took me a few minutes, but I finally remembered his name, Benjamin Clausen. Yeah, that was it. He had been a big football hero at State, leading the team to its first regional championship in decades. The backup files forgotten, I opened my web browser and started searching. I think the average person would be shocked, and maybe a little frightened, by what you can uncover with a simple Google search. In just 30 minutes, I had found pictures, biographical information, and even some of his employment history, all publicly available. I was amazed at how easy it was. With this kind of access, I briefly wondered how private investigators even stayed in business. But then, I got absorbed in the task at hand. Apparently, Mr. Clausen had made a name for himself in real estate after college. He had tried for the NFL, but a knee injury had derailed that dream. He initially moved to Denver, Colorado, before returning to our hometown about 2 years ago to establish his own real estate office. Judging from the publicly available information, he must be pretty good at moving property. I'll admit, he certainly had the looks to be a successful salesman. He'd also gotten married and had a child. His son was a cute little guy. I thought his wife was attractive, but she couldn't hold a candle to Britt, not in my opinion, anyway. Her name was Angela Clausen, formerly Miller, and she was 37. In the photo I found online, she had soft, curly honey brown hair. Her eyes were a nice shade of green, and she had a cute set of dimples when she smiled. She was heavier than Brittany, but she wasn't overweight. To be fair, Britt was so tiny that most women you meet are heavier than her. Mrs. Clausen was an accountant and apparently worked in her husband's real estate office. That, I thought with disgust, is the perfect setup. As a realtor, he'd be in and out of the office all the time, but he'd always know exactly where she was. It would make finding time for any extracurricular activities easy, with little chance of her catching him in the act. Then a wicked idea crossed my mind. I glanced at the clock, 10:33 a.m., it read. I searched my local online phone directory for the number to Ben Clausen's real estate office and made the call. Good morning, you've reached Clausen Real Estate Agency, your local partner for all your property needs. How may I direct your call? Came a pleasantly throaty female voice. Good morning. Could you connect me to Mr. Ben Clausen, please? I asked. I'm so sorry, the voice replied. Mr. Clausen is out showing a property at the moment. I expect him back in about an hour, or 90 minutes at the latest. Would you like to leave your contact information, and I'll have him call you back? No, thank you, I said. I think I'll just try again later. Goodbye. I pressed the end key and slipped my phone back into my vest pocket. I took one last moment to think. I didn't know for sure that there was anything like an affair going on between this guy and my wife. However, the fact that Britt was engaging in something very inappropriate with another man was undeniable. The man in the Google Earth photo looked an awful lot like Ben Clausen, and the fact that he was a former boyfriend didn't help matters. I felt an overwhelming urge to act, to do something. Maybe it wasn't the best idea, but I decided to go on the offensive. I picked up a copy of the printout I'd made of the photo and headed out to my truck, locking the office behind me. I hopped in and started the engine, but as I turned to check behind me before backing out, I saw a stray toy car sitting on the bench of the crew cab. My son must have dropped it the last time he rode in the truck. In spite of my anger, I paused. No matter what was going on, and no matter what happened, the choices I made would affect more than just me and Britt. There were also two precious, innocent lives to consider, lives that, as a loving father, I had an unbreakable responsibility to protect. Anger mixed with reason for a few agonizing moments before I finally released the brake and backed out into the street. I drove to the address listed for Clausen's office. It was located on the 5th floor of the new office building, part of the revitalized downtown project. Not that there was all that much downtown to revitalize, I mused as I parallel parked nearby. I waved to the foreman of one of my work crews as I strode toward the main entrance. Ironically, my company had the contract for the grounds around this property, I reflected. The foreman looked a little surprised when I entered the building instead of walking over to speak with him, but I was on a mission, and for now, I had a totally different kind of business on my mind. I garnered some strange looks as I made my way across the atrium to the elevators, but I was used to that. Even without my attire, worn, faded work jeans, heavy boots, a snug t-shirt stretched over my muscles, and my reflective contractor vest, I would stand out among the business suits and skirts. My size always drew double takes from the pale-skinned cubicle dwellers inhabiting places like this. After a brief wait in the elevator, I arrived on the 5th floor. Soon, I was stepping through the door of Clausen Real Estate Agency. Sitting at the receptionist's desk was Mrs. Clausen herself. Her photos were either outdated or had been taken by someone who didn't care about capturing her at her best. Still, she was easy to recognize, the same hair, the same slightly rounded face, and the same cute dimpled smile. But she was definitely slimmer than her photos had suggested. She wore a professional business suit, and when she stood to greet me, I noticed she had opted for a pleated, thigh-length skirt instead of trousers. She was also taller than I had expected, taller than Britt. As she approached, I estimated that the top of her head would reach my chin, rather than just my chest. "Hello," she said, extending her hand courteously. "I'm Angela. How can I help you today?" I returned her handshake, noting the firm, professional grip she had. She didn't hesitate to make eye contact either. Clearly, this was a competent businesswoman who knew how to greet potential clients. My first impression was favorable. Perhaps we could help each other. "Hello, I'm Donald Summers," I said. "I'm pleased to meet you, Mr. Summers." "How can I assist you?" she asked. "Mrs. Clausen," I began formally, "I have a photograph I'd like you to take a look at, and then I have a few questions." I held up the manila envelope with the picture inside. Angela's eyes narrowed as she registered my serious tone and expression. "I take it you're not here to talk about buying a house," she said dryly. It wasn't a question, but I shook my head anyway. She considered me for a moment, then her face returned to a professional, business-like demeanor. "Please follow me," she said simply. She led me toward a door at the back of the room. As we passed through, she paused to call into an adjacent office. "Chris, will you watch the front desk for me, please?" "Sure, Angie," came a deep voice from inside. Without another word, she led me to what appeared to be the break room and closed the door behind us. She seated herself comfortably at the table and gestured for me to join her. Her expression made it clear she was waiting for me to get to the point. I opened the envelope, pulled out the photo, and handed it to her. "The woman in this photo is my wife, Brittany," I said. "I know that when we were in college, she dated Ben Clausen for a while. I want your opinion. Do you think that man is your husband?" Angela took the photo reluctantly, as though it was something unpleasant that had to be dealt with. She stared at it for several minutes, her expression shifting from curiosity to a sort of sick sadness, and then finally to anger. After about 5 or 6 minutes, she handed it back to me. "Yes," she said. "I'm pretty sure that's him." "When was this taken?" "I don't know exactly," I admitted. "I found it on Google Earth Street View. They're standing in the front door of my house, but it can't be more than 3 months old." "How do you know that?" she asked. I pointed to Britt's ear in the photo. "I gave her those earrings for Christmas," I said simply. Her eyes met mine, and I noticed a hint of sympathy. Then she looked out the window for a few minutes before turning back to face me. "I'm as certain as I can be that that's my husband in the photo," she said heavily. "I recognize his clothing and his face. The fact that they used to date makes it even more suspicious." "Have you talked to your wife about this?" "No, I just found the photo this morning," I said. "Besides, with her schedule, she should be at work right now." "But is she at work?" Angela asked. I stared at her for a moment, then sighed. Quietly, I pulled out my phone and dialed Brittany's cell. I didn't expect her to answer during work hours, and she didn't. Next, I called the gym where she trained. The person who answered was Mandy Thomas, another trainer and a friend of ours. "Hi there, Don," she said brightly after recognizing my voice. "What's up?" "Hi, Mandy. Listen, I really need to talk to Britt. Will you put her on, please?" There was silence on the line for a moment. Mandy was so quiet I could hear the fast-paced music from the exercise floor, along with the clinking of weight machines. "Mandy? You still there?" Yeah, Don," she replied, her voice trailing off. "What?" I asked, growing tired of the hesitation. Don, she left just a little while ago. She said she was meeting you for lunch." "Really?" I said coldly. "How long ago did she leave?" "Maybe 10 minutes ago," Mandy said nervously, obviously realizing something was wrong. "And did she say where she was meeting me, by any chance?" "Yes, she said something about going to Logan," Mandy said, still sounding uneasy. "Thank you, Mandy," I said, and hung up the phone. "Well? What did she say?" Angela asked. "Hang on just a second," I replied. I opened the Find My Phone app. Britt and I each had it, mostly because she was always misplacing hers. I had offered many times to get her a phone case that clipped to her belt or waistband, but she always refused. The app took only seconds to show me her phone's location. It was at our house. Of course, that didn't necessarily mean that Britt was there. She'd had her phone in hand when she left this morning, so it wasn't a case of her leaving it behind. I put away my phone, looked at Angela, and told her what I'd been told and what I had just discovered. I watched as her expression hardened with anger. Before I knew it, she was up from her seat, heading back toward the front of the office. I had to hurry to keep up. "Chris," she said, "I'm going to lunch. If Mr. Clausen arrives before I get back, call me immediately." "Clear?" "Yes, ma'am," the startled worker replied. Angela glanced at me as we entered the elevator, her eyes smoldering with anger. "With the mood I'm in, I think you'd better drive," she said, jabbing the button for the ground floor with more force than necessary. "There better be a damn good explanation for that photo. I've already let him off the hook once." "He's cheated on you before?" I asked, startled, then immediately regretted asking such a personal question. "I'm sorry, that wasn't—" "Don't worry about it," she said with a half smile. "And yes, he's done it before. Back in Colorado, actually. Part of the reason we moved here to Indiana was to get a fresh start. I forgave the bastard because of little Robbie." Her eyes softened when she mentioned her son, but then they hardened again. "But Robbie isn't so little anymore, and I'm not in a forgiving mood this morning." The first few minutes of the car ride were silent. Eventually, though, Angela's curiosity or the need to vent her pain got the better of her. "I'm a little surprised your wife would be bold enough to take my husband to your home," she said. "It's a risk," I replied. "But a minimal one. She knows that at this time of year, I don't tend to leave the office because of everything I have to get done. I'm a creature of habit, and she knows me well. Even if I did step out, I'd call her, giving her more than enough time to get her guest out of the house." My voice was bitter, and I knew it. I gave Angela an apologetic look, so she'd know I didn't blame her. I'm so damn trusting and predictable. She could have been seeing someone behind my back for years, and I'd never have known. Angela was quiet for a moment as I drove, trying to focus on the road. When she spoke again, there was a sympathetic tone in her voice. "There are almost always signs when a spouse is cheating," she said quietly. "Yeah, I know," I replied. "But I haven't seen any. Our, intimate life hasn't changed, and she hasn't been acting differently toward me or the kids, at least not that I've noticed. No late nights out or anything suspicious. There weren't any obvious signs with Ben either," Angela added. "Not before and not recently." Her voice trailed off into silence as she stared out the windshield. I shrugged helplessly, still focused on the traffic around me. As I turned onto my street, I saw a red car in the driveway. I was so focused on that discovery that Angela's voice startled me. "That's Ben's car," she said, her tone a mix of anger and sadness. I understood why. If what we found inside confirmed my suspicions, it would end my marriage, and probably hers, too. I parked in front of my neighbor's house. After a glance at Angela, I got out and headed toward the gate to my backyard. Angela followed me silently, though I noticed she had taken a digital camera out of her purse. I had an even nicer one in my office, but naturally, I hadn't thought to grab it. Quietly, I opened the gate, and we padded softly into the backyard. Moments later, we were at the back door. I unlocked it and let us inside, closing the door quietly behind us. I paused, listening. I could hear my wife's voice, and there was no mistaking what was happening. The sounds were intimate, and beneath the shell of my rage, my heart broke hearing her voice. I gestured silently for Angela to follow me. Her expression was odd, but I was too focused on Britt's voice to pay much attention. We moved through the kitchen toward the living room, where the sounds were coming from. As I carefully peered around the corner, there she was, Brittany, lying on the couch. I froze for a moment in confusion. What I saw wasn't what I had expected. A young blonde woman was in the room with her, and nearby, Ben was recording the scene on a tablet. Angela raised her camera and began recording as well. The shock of what I was seeing finally broke, and rage surged through me. I tried to keep a firm grip on my emotions, but it was getting harder. Before I could do anything, Angela's hand shot out and grabbed my arm. I turned to her, angry at the interruption, but she shook her head and motioned for me to wait. I hesitated, my stomach turning as I watched. After a few more moments, Ben joined in on what was happening, and that was the final straw. I snapped. Angela didn't stand a chance of holding me back. Ben Claw's son was at least 6 feet 2 inches, but it was hard to tell as he knelt on my couch, fully absorbed in what he was doing. He must have weighed a solid 190 pounds, and while he was in decent shape, he couldn't match me for sheer size and strength. Something, maybe the creaking of the floor or some instinct, alerted the unknown woman to my approach. She turned around, her eyes widening in shock. She didn't make a sound, but at this point, it wouldn't have mattered. I was too close for any of them to try to escape or put up a fight. I brushed past her without the slap I wanted to give her. She'd get what was coming for her, but I had my sights set on Ben first. I reached down and grabbed a handful of his hair, yanking him off the couch and spilling him onto the floor. Absently, I noticed he wasn't exactly impressive, which made me wonder why Brittany even bothered with him. He let out a scream of pain, trying to break free from my grip. Brittany screamed in shock, her eyes snapping open. The unknown woman just stood there, wide-eyed with fear. "Shut up, all of you!" I roared, slamming Ben's head against the edge of the couch for emphasis. The blow wasn't hard enough to injure him seriously, but it sent a message. The woman, looking ready to bolt, froze as I glared at her. I growled, my voice low and threatening, "Don't even think about leaving. If you do, I'll make sure you regret ever touching my wife." By now, Ben had finally figured out how to break my grip. Instead of pulling away, he pushed into my fist and scrambled to his feet. He swung, landing a punch squarely in my gut, but it only fueled my anger. In response, I brought my heavy steel-toed boot down on his foot. Judging by his scream, I must have broken something. He crumpled to the floor again, and I took a moment to catch my breath, acknowledging that his punch had landed harder than I'd expected. As I glanced at the woman again, recognition hit me. It was Jamie Keller, the girl from down the block. She was 19, in school for nursing or something related to healthcare. Brittany and I had even hired her to babysit a few times. "Jamie?" I said, barely believing my eyes. She nodded miserably, trying to cover herself. "What? Why are you?" My words faltered, and she whispered an apology. "How long have you been involved with my wife?" I demanded angrily. "This is only the second time, I swear," she stammered. "There shouldn't have been a first time." I growled, furious. To me, it didn't matter if Brittany was with another man or a woman, cheating was cheating. I picked up Ben's tablet, which had fallen to the floor during the chaos. "I've got you on video, doing things you really shouldn't be doing," I said coldly, holding the tablet up so Jamie could see. "Get out of my house. If you ever have contact with my wife again, whether you see her in a mall or anywhere else, I will make sure this video gets posted everywhere. I'll send it to your parents, your grandparents, your school. I'll ruin your life. Do you understand me?" Jamie looked horrified, nodding as she whispered, "Yes, I understand." "Good," I snapped. "Now get out, and don't ever come back." She hurriedly gathered her clothes, but before she could dress, I barked at her again. "Oh no! You're leaving exactly as you are. Walk out that door, stark naked, like the disgrace you are. When you're outside, you can put your clothes back on. Now, move." I held up the tablet, recording her as she gathered her things and awkwardly walked to the front door. She stepped outside, quickly dressed, and sprinted down the street toward her parents' house. Thankfully for her, most of the neighbors were at work, so no one was likely to have seen her. Ben let out a pained whimper, drawing my attention back to him. He was still lying in a heap at the foot of the couch, and I noticed his left foot starting to swell. It looked painful, poor thing. He glared at me with pure hatred, but he had already seen his wife standing in the archway, filming the scene. He must have realized he was cornered, so he decided to stay still for now, showing more sense than I would have given him credit for. "So, Benji," I said, my tone full of fake warmth, "I haven't seen you since college, buddy. How are things going?" I nudged him lightly with my steel-toed boot, and he winced. "Don't hurt him," came Angela's voice. "Yes, he is hurt," I replied. "So what?" Angela made an exasperated sound and stepped fully into the living room, walking to the couch. She spared a gaze of loathing at my wife before handing me her camera and kneeling by her husband's side. "His foot is definitely broken," she said, surveying the damage. "You don't need an X-ray to see that." "Damn, Dawn, he could throw a blood clot, you might have killed him." She looked up at me, a little frightened. "If I wanted to kill him, I would have done it," I said. "However, I have no desire whatsoever to kill him, or Jamie, or Brittany for that matter. If I kill them, I go to prison and never see my kids again. I'm not so far gone that I don't realize that. But there's also this, you can only kill someone once. After that, you can't make them suffer anymore, and I certainly wouldn't want that." I let my eyes wander over Ben, and then Brittany. Oh yes, I wanted them both to suffer. I was hurting badly, after all. It felt like someone had ripped my heart out of my chest. I wanted both of them to really feel pain. Ben was already getting his share, but I didn't feel our business was done just yet. It takes two to tango, they say. Well, apparently in this case, it had taken three, but who's counting, right? The point is, Brittany wasn't some victim. She was a willing participant, and I was going to make sure she got her share of suffering too. I pulled out my cell phone and hit a number on speed dial, making sure it was on speaker. It only rang 3 times before someone picked up. "Hi, George," I said, recognizing my father-in-law's voice. Brittany squeezed her eyes shut, realizing who it was. When she opened them, she stared at me, silently pleading for mercy. Her pleas were pointless. There was no way I was going to let her off without inflicting the maximum amount of damage I could. Why should I be the only one hurting? "Dawn," George replied warmly, "nice to hear from you. What's up?" "Well, George, sorry to bug you, but something serious has come up. Is there any way you and Virginia could stop by the house? The sooner, the better." "What's happened?" he asked, concerned. "Are the kids okay?" "The kids are fine, George, they're still at school," I said. "It's about Brittany and me. If I were to start explaining over the phone, you probably wouldn't believe me. I'd rather show you some proof." George went quiet for a moment, likely guessing what was going on. That didn't surprise me. I'd respected him since our first meeting. He was a smart man. There were only so many reasons for me to make a call like this if it didn't involve his grandkids. He spoke again, his voice sad. "We'll be there in 15 minutes or less, Dawn. Please don't do anything rash before we get there." "Don't worry," I told him. "I'll think very carefully about everything I'm going to do." I ended the call and then called my own parents. After a remarkably similar conversation, I put my phone away. Brittany sobbed uncontrollably, huddled at one end of the couch. She tried to get dressed or at least cover herself with a throw, but I stopped her with a look. She knew what I wanted. Brittany would have to face the consequences of her actions. Angela, however, wasn't eager to play along. "He needs a hospital, Dawn," she said firmly. "I know you want to completely destroy your wife, and I don't blame you, but there are limits to how far I'll go." "All right," I said, "but how about this? Instead of taking him to the ER, why don't you call an ambulance?" She looked at me, evaluating. I saw the moment she understood why I made the suggestion, it would take an ambulance 10 to 15 minutes to get here. When they arrived, they'd spend a few more minutes assessing the patient before taking him to the hospital. In other words, I was stalling without denying her request to get him some treatment. Her look told me she admired my creativity, but not my cruelty. Nonetheless, she sighed and nodded in concession. "Never mind the flashing lights, Dawn," Angela said. "A few more minutes won't make much difference. But as soon as your revenge fantasy is played out, I have to take him to the ER. Do you get me?" "I get you," I replied. "You can hang onto the tablet and camera until you've got all the data you need. After that, return the camera. I'll need it for my own divorce. I don't really care what you do with this tablet." "Thank you, Angela," I said. She nodded, then pulled out her phone and called the real estate office, telling them she had an emergency and to close up for the day because Mr. Clausen was heading to the ER. As I listened, I couldn't help but wonder why she was still with this guy. He'd already betrayed her once, and she'd said she was going to divorce him. Why stay? If I were in her shoes, I'd have thrown him out faster than a live grenade. My parents arrived first. They lived closer, so that was no surprise. I opened the door and let them in. Mom saw Brittany and Ben first and froze in her tracks. Dad saw them just a second later, his expression shifting from shock to confusion. "Donnie, honey, what on earth is going on?" Mom demanded, her voice full of disbelief. My father didn't say anything out loud, but his look spoke volumes. His gaze moved from a sobbing Brittany to a stern Angela, then to Ben in obvious pain, and finally, to me. I could see he didn't need an explanation. He placed a comforting hand on my shoulder, even as Mom turned red-faced at the sight of her daughter-in-law's state of undress in front of strangers. "Donnie," she demanded again, "what on earth is happening here?" I calmly explained everything, leaving nothing out and offering to show her video from 2 different perspectives. She quickly declined, her face reddening further. She grabbed an Afghan from the love seat and moved to hand it to Brittany, but I stopped her. "No, Mom," I said firmly. "I want George and Virginia to see her just as she is. I want them to know, without a doubt, that I'm not the one who wrecked this marriage." "Oh, Donnie, please don't say that," Brittany cried. "Shut up," I replied coldly. "What did you think was going to happen? I walked in on you, having a threesome with 2 pieces of human garbage, and you didn't think I'd want a divorce? You've got to be one of the dumbest people I've ever met." She shrank into herself, curling her arms and legs around her body. She became a trembling, pitiful ball on the couch as we waited for her parents to arrive. Fortunately, we didn't have to wait long. My in-laws, George and Virginia Carson, pulled up just moments later. My father met them at the door and let them in. Virginia greeted my parents with mild surprise, but George wasn't fazed at all. I wondered if he'd already talked to Virginia about what he suspected. When Virginia saw her daughter huddled on the couch, she gasped. "My God, Brittany, what are you doing?" she cried, rushing towards her daughter but stopping short when she almost tripped over Ben. "Who is this? What is going on here?" "Well, should I be the one to tell her, or will you?" I asked Brittany. When she remained silent, her only sound a pathetic whimper, I proceeded to explain. I recounted my morning, how I discovered what was going on through the camera feed, the results of my search, and what I'd found when I walked into the house. Through it all, both my parents and hers remained silent. Naturally, that didn't last. "Donald," Virginia began, her voice trembling, "there simply has to be some kind of mistake. There's no way Brittany would ever do something like this. I have video on 2 different devices that would seem to disprove that, Virginia," I said calmly. "Would you like to see it?" I pulled the SD card from Angela's camera and walked toward the TV, fully intending to play it. I didn't respect Brittany anymore, and I wasn't going to let anyone doubt my word. "No, son, please don't," my mother said softly. Her voice was filled with compassion, but there was a firm undertone. "It won't solve anything. It'll just hurt people." I won't let anyone question the truth, I said firmly. If there are doubts, I want to settle them here and now. Don, George said, holding up his hand in a placating gesture, what are you going to do now? I think that's the most important question. I looked at him, my face betraying some of my emotions. What did he think I was going to do? I'm sorry, George, but divorce is the only option, I said. I don't want to live with something like that, and I sure as hell don't want it around me every day. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Angela helping Ben stand. I did nothing to interfere as she gathered his discarded clothes. I had to use all my willpower not to laugh as she helped him limp painfully out to his car, half-dressed. It was only fitting, I thought, for him to do the walk of shame. George Carson's face tightened when I referred to his daughter as it, but he chose not to address it, at least for now. First, I began, I want custody of the kids. Brittany can have visitation, but they'll live with me. That's non-negotiable. Now hold on just a second, Donald. Virginia objected, but I cut her off. This isn't a negotiation. I hold all the cards here. Either I get what I'm asking for, or Brittany's little escapade will go viral. Do we understand each other? I turned to Brittany, my expression hard. More importantly, do you understand? She looked up at me, anger finally bubbling to the surface. Don't call me that anymore, she shouted, her humiliation and shame now overpowered by her fury. You are that, I shot back. You're nothing but trash. And I'll be damned if I let you raise our daughter to be like you. As you can imagine, things quickly spiraled into a full-blown shouting match. I wasn't willing to budge, and neither were Brittany and my in-laws. 2 hours passed, filled with angry voices, until I noticed it was almost time for the kids to come home from school. I looked at Brittany with a mix of hatred and heartbreak. The kids will be home soon, I hissed. Go wash your face, get dressed, and we can tell them why Mommy won't be living here anymore. No way, she shot back. I'll tell them why their father won't be living here anymore. Oh really? I said, my voice low and dangerous. You get started on that little fantasy. I'll be in the den, preparing the truth. As Brittany and both our parents watched, I headed towards the den where they knew I kept the home computer. I wasn't bluffing, and I think they finally realized that. Either I was getting what I wanted, or the video of Brittany's betrayal would spread like wildfire. Brittany rushed after me. No, wait, she cried. You know the courts won't give you custody. The way things are these days, I could commit murder and still get the kids. Not if you tell the judge you don't want them, I said coldly. She stared at me, and I stared back, letting her see every ounce of rage and pain I felt. I wanted her to know how deeply she had hurt me, but apparently, she wasn't ready to give in. Damn it, Dawn, you can't do this, she yelled. Really? Watch me. You wouldn't. You love me. Love you? I scoffed. You're delusional. Of course I'll do it. I'll take pleasure in doing it. I never thought the love of my life would betray me like this, but I was wrong, wasn't I? And now I find out there's even more to the story. Well, I'm learning a lot today. She teared up again, but I was beyond caring. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and just wanted to be done with this. You hate me that much? You'd really do this to me? She asked, her voice trembling. You love me so much that you betrayed me with multiple people, I replied. So yeah, I'll return the favor. I'll never forgive you for what I saw today. And if you don't give me what I want, I'll dedicate the rest of my life to making sure you regret it, even if I destroy myself in the process. I paused, staring at the woman I once loved more than anything. I had no idea how long she had been betraying me, but I knew for certain it wasn't just with men. I had undeniable proof of that now. Are Danielle and Brian even mine? I asked, my voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Brittany looked shocked. How can you ask me that? How can you cheat on me with multiple partners? I shot back. Right now, I wouldn't believe you if you told me the earth is round. I thought you loved me. I trusted you completely because I never thought you'd stab me in the back. Now, I don't know what to believe. I never dreamed you'd turn out to be like this. Shaking my head in disgust, I pocketed the SD card and grabbed the tablet, turning away from the den. Brittany was right behind me as I walked back to the living room, where our parents were deep in conversation. "Do you think he'd really do that, Frank?" Virginia asked, her voice shaky. "This could ruin Brittany's future." Honestly, Virginia, after what she's done to my son, I couldn't care less about her future. What she did is nothing short of monstrous, and she deserves every bit of the fallout. My father's voice was firm and unwavering. "And you're worried about poor Brittany? What about my son? What about his heartbreak?" I entered the room just then, and everyone turned to look at me. Virginia seemed nervous as I gave her a disgusted look and shook my head. I didn't bother making a comment. After all, she was Brittany's mother and was bound to support her, no matter how misplaced that support seemed. "Listen, Don," Virginia began, "I don't think it's fair to insist on custody. At their age, kids need their mom." "I'm sorry, Mrs. Carson," I cut in, "but did I somehow give you the impression that I care what you think? On the other hand, would I want my daughter around an immoral, characterless woman who shows no regard for her marriage and family? Would you want that? Oh, let me guess, you already raised that." I continued, "You can fight this all you want, but you know what the consequences will be. I'm surprised neither of you seems concerned that your daughter is a cheater. But whatever. You can leave now. I'd appreciate it if you took your daughter with you, but I'm not holding my breath." The two of them looked at me as if I had slapped them. Then they started talking over each other, criticizing me for being rude and expressing their hope that Brittany would take everything from me in the divorce. Since you've been following these sorts of stories on the Lost Love Chronicles, you might expect that I'd come out on top. However, you might be surprised to learn that things didn't go exactly as either of us wanted. Then again, maybe you're not that surprised. Life has a way of screwing with you. Brittany's comment about the courts might have been an exaggeration, but it wasn't far from the truth. I didn't think Brittany would actually call my bluff on the video, but she did. The problem for her was, I don't bluff. If I say I'll do something, I'll do it. Even though my parents, my lawyer, and even Angela told me it was a bad idea, when the judge awarded her custody, Brittany flashed the biggest grin I'd ever seen. I just smiled back. As soon as I returned to the room my parents were letting me use, I grabbed the tablet Ben had left behind and drove to the nearest coffee shop. Using their Wi-Fi, I uploaded my edited video to every spicy site I could find. I also used Ben's tablet to email links to everyone in Brittany's family that I could think of. Afterwards, I threw the tablet in the river and posted links to social media. Ben was careless enough not to change his passwords, even though he knew I had his tablet. True to my word, Brittany became a minor celebrity among that crowd. 1 month after posting the video, she lost her job at the gym, though she still kept custody of the children. Fortunately, since the divorce was finalized before she was fired, I didn't have to pay spousal support. It was a small mercy, but I took it. Brittany tried to claim a share of the family business, but she failed miserably. I don't get ownership of the business until my father passes away. For now, he owns it and pays me a salary. I never invested any of our joint money into it. Everything came from a slush fund my dad started long ago, and I could document it. For my financially predatory ex, the judge awarded Brittany $600 a month in child support. My lawyer couldn't prevent that, but he was able to defer payments until we got the results of a paternity test. I mostly insisted on the test to hurt Brittany, not because I doubted the kids were mine. It was a relief to get confirmation. Brittany got half of our savings and half of the checking account but did not get the house. She couldn't afford it even before losing her job, so my attorney forced the sale of the house. I'm not sure how he managed it, and I didn't want to know. We split the money from the sale, and she bought a smaller house in the same school district. I felt a twinge of sympathy for the kids. They loved their home, but I couldn't stand the thought of Brittany profiting from her betrayal. I bought a small 3-bedroom house in the same district, too. I had to impose strict limits on my spending to afford it with the child support payments, but I managed. Dad wanted me to increase my salary, but I refused. If I did, the courts would just increase the child support payments. Danielle and Brian did at least seem to like my new house, but they hated the fact that their mother and I weren't together anymore. I tried my best to keep their little minds occupied with other things. We frequently went to the park, rode bikes on the trails, or went hiking. Sometimes, if I had a little extra money, we would go swimming at the aquatic center. We had a lot of fun together. On the personal front, I was lonely. Brittany had been a wonderful partner, and our intimate life had been rich and frequent. That was one reason I never suspected her of cheating. As soon as the divorce was final, I started dating again. I had done nothing wrong and saw no reason I should have to be without someone special in my life. I had no trouble attracting female attention, so getting dates wasn't hard. The intimacy was usually good, but I just didn't seem to click with anyone. There's nothing wrong with a casual relationship, but that kind of thing got old quickly. I wanted more than just that. I wanted a relationship again. The kids would drop little tidbits of information about their mom on occasion. I knew why they did it and it didn't anger me. They still had no idea why we split, and I hoped it would stay that way. They were trying to get me interested in their mother again, which wasn't something I was willing to entertain. I didn't love or care about her anymore, and nothing they said would ever change that. About 6 months after the divorce, I bumped into Mandy Thomas, one of the personal trainers at the gym where Brittany had worked. I was at the grocery store stocking up after a week with the kids, who had almost emptied the cupboards. "Hi there, stranger," came her bright, cheerful voice. "Oh, hello Mandy," I said. "How are you?" "Not bad at all, thanks." "But more importantly, how are you?" she asked. I shrugged and smiled. "I'm doing okay, I guess. I work and go home mostly. I look forward to my weeks with the kids. They're chomping at the bit for Christmas, even though it's not even Halloween yet." She laughed with me, and I couldn't help admiring her tight figure, bright green eyes, and shining auburn hair. It surprised me a little to realize that she was checking me out just as I was doing to her. Mandy had been dating someone the last I'd heard, but perhaps she was single now. Her next words proved she was thinking along similar lines. "So, are you seeing anyone now?" "Nothing serious," I said, shrugging again. "Honestly, I just haven't clicked with anyone." "I do know," she said, leaning forward and touching my arm gently. Mandy was taller than Brittany by at least 7 inches, and she didn't have to step back to look me in the eye. I thought privately that I bet I could get to like her. She was attractive, smart, funny, and probably a real handful in bed too. Her soft laughter pulled me away from my private thoughts. "Do you like what you see?" Mandy asked, her eyes sparkling. "Yes," I said quietly, deciding to go for it. "I like what I see very much, Mandy. I'm wondering if you have any dinner plans tonight." "As a matter of fact, I don't have any plans for tonight," she replied, stepping closer to me. "Then how about you come over to my place and I'll cook for you?" I suggested, gently wrapping an arm around her slender waist and pulling her against me. "After that, maybe we can talk about some dessert." My relationship with Mandy did a lot to restore the confidence I hadn't realized I'd lost. She was an inventive and responsive partner, even smarter than I'd originally thought. She was funny, good with the kids, and a wonderful listener and friend. We agreed to be exclusive after our 3rd date, and I never regretted it for a moment. There was just something about her that I found irresistible. With her, I had the companionship I'd been missing for so long. I guess you could say that she made me feel complete, if that doesn't sound too sappy. Regardless of how it sounds, I was happy, really happy, for the first time since the divorce. Mandy and I had been together for several months when I got a surprise call from my ex-in-laws. Hello, I said. Hello, Donald, this is George Carson. Yes, George, what did you want? I asked, less than enthusiastically. I had once liked George, but that had ended during the divorce. I admit that making Brittany a star in the world of adult films hadn't helped, but these things happen when you deal with someone who thinks they have nothing to lose. I wanted to let you know that we have the kids at the moment, he said. Brittany is in the hospital in Virginia, and I would like to stay with her. Would you mind coming to get them? Of course not. When would be a good time? I asked. George didn't reply immediately. He was probably expecting me to ask why my ex was in the hospital, which struck me as odd. Why would I care? Any time is fine, really, he said at last. But if you don't mind, I was hoping you could get them by 6 tonight. No problem at all, I said. I'm not occupied at the moment, so I'll come over straight away. Don't you care at all that Brittany is hospitalized? He asked before I could end the call. No, not really, I said. Not unless it's something contagious that could hurt the kids. It isn't, is it? No, George said heavily. She's not in that kind of hospital. She's in Catherine Center. Ah, Catherine Center. I knew it was a psychiatric hospital, though in today's PC climate, it was called a mental wellness and stress clinic. Okay, whatever, I said unflinchingly. As long as it doesn't affect the kids, I couldn't care less. I ended the call. The story continues in the next video. Link to part 2 in the description of this video. Thank you for watching and for your likes.